Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live with Buckeye Mike. Um, Due to our guest and my video scheduling, I hope you don't kill me.
It's all good. It's all good. I'll allow it. I'll allow it this once. You got the purple background, so we're good.
I thought I'd go all purple for you, but I didn't have anything purple or TCU, and I'm like, oh,
You need,
I
you
hope
need
she
to get
doesn't
on
get
the
to
home
me.
field apparel. You got to get on the home field apparel. They're a sponsor of my podcast, and they do the best throwback marks. They do have Oklahoma State as well. Got some Ohio State, but their TCU line is pretty top notch.
I bet. But yeah, so as you figured out, TCU, I would say fanatic. Um,
Sure, fair.
Frogs Insider co-host podcast. Go over there before we're done and check it out. They do really good work over there, very detailed. And I will tell you, she is one of the few. She absolutely knows her football, 100%. So,
I do my best. I do my best.
and you're the flag football head coach for St. Francis High School.
Yeah. First year program, new sport, in the state of California, and I'm going to be the first coach in the program's history. So we kick that off in about a week. We'll start practices and conditioning, and got like 90 kids signed up wanting to play. So that's pretty awesome. We're really excited about that. It's going to be just a great thing for girls across the state to get to participate in.
Definitely sounds like a new avenue for you for sure.
I like to keep busy, like to keep things interesting. So, and the good thing is we don't practice on Fridays, so it doesn't interfere with my travel schedule to get out to TCU games. That was one of my deal makers.
So, to actually get into this, where's the fan base mood or attitude? I don't want to like to copy people, so I know Josh Pate uses mood, but where's the attitude of the fan base on Sunny Dykes?
I mean, I think that's a great question. Obviously coming off of last season, everything was so unexpected. Getting TCU, to the Big 12 champion, starting 12-0, getting the Big 12 championship, getting to and winning a playoff game, and then making the national championship. People were there was not a TCU fan that I talked to that was upset about the way that game went. It was just kind of like we ran into a buzzsaw and Georgia was just pissed off and better. But that didn't really hurt people's feelings around him. He had so much goodwill. He recruited really well. And then he made a pretty controversial hire at offensive coordinator, bringing in Kendall Briles, who is the son of Art Briles, who was, kind of the fulcrum of the scandal at Baylor, and was fired when it was discovered that there'd kind of been an institutional cover up of a lot of sexual misconduct on that campus. And so I think TCU fans, you hired a Briles, which is, the sworn enemy of TCU because of his association with Baylor. But then you also brought in somebody that could be kind of polarizing. Sonny was very open and very honest in addressing, and he answered those questions at Big 12 Media Day a couple weeks ago. He's actually gotten a chance to speak with Coach Briles last week. And, I still have a lot of questions, but kind of came away feeling like this is somebody who isn't, at the very least, is very invested in TCU. And I do believe Sonny Dykes does hold the line as far as making sure that conduct is appropriate. And I believe TCU also feels that way. And so I am cautiously optimistic that he's learned and grown from his previous experiences. He hasn't run into any issues in his previous two stops on his way to TCU. And so there's, I think a lot of people feel like, hey, let's give him a shot. He's also, had some success, and there's a good portion of the fan base that's all they care about. The off the field stuff isn't going to sway them one way or the other. So all that being said, I think people are very excited about Sonny Dykes. I think they love how he's transformed the program, how he's used the portal, how he fundraises, the coaches that he brings in, the recruits that he brings in. But now it's kind of hey, you did this with a very veteran team that was comprised mostly of Gary Patterson's players. What can you do in year two? I don't think we expect TCU to make a playoff run, but if they fall to 6-6, then people might say, oh, this is the Sonny Dykes that we thought he was, not the Sonny Dykes that he proved that he was in year one. So I think most people believe in him, and they believe in his plan for the program, the way he wants to grow the program. Now it's just a matter of at the end of the day, people soured on Gary Patterson, because he didn't win. So you got to win. But I think people really want Sonny Dykes to succeed and believe that he can. So I'd say overwhelmingly positive would be the short answer to that.
While we stay on Dykes, how has he impacted recruiting, and what does the 24 class currently look like for TCU?
So that's interesting too, because a lot of people don't realize, unless you follow the Big 12 closely, that even when TCU was struggling, they were still generally recruiting third in the conference behind just Texas and Oklahoma. They would have the third highest rated class. TCU has still yet to sign a true 5-star out of high school. That's not happened. But when you look at what Sonny Dykes has done in the portal, bringing in multiple 5-stars, including multiple 5-stars from the University of Alabama as transfers this year, 3 of them, in fact, running back, a wide receiver, and an offensive lineman. And he's, also brought in some other really highly coveted players out of the portal. But he has done that without costing himself in high school recruiting. He is very well loved in the state of Texas. He's made it his mantra that he's going to recruit Texas hard. That's something that Gary Patterson did, but then kind of expanded TCU's footprint. They recruited a ton out of Louisiana, out of California, and even on the East Coast. And so Sonny Dykes has kind of said, no, we're going to drill in DFW, especially Houston and other parts of Texas, and still into Louisiana, because there's so much, obviously, talent there. But he has earned a lot of respect from high school coaches in the area because of that. He's also just genuinely just a really affable, likable guy. So when he shows up at a campus or he calls up a high school coach, they're willing to talk to him. They want to talk to him. They want to advocate for him in TCU. So it's good. Like, I saw Bud Elliott was tweeting about kind of the blue chip ratio and teams that had an opportunity to actually win a national championship based on resources, recruiting, et cetera. And he said, if TCU was truly a national contender, then they'd be capitalizing on a run to the national championship with a top, 5, top 10 class. I don't think that those two things necessarily correlate. TCU signed a very highly regarded quarterback, or has offered a commitment from very highly recruited quarterback, Haas Haney, who's a local kid out of Aledo. He's a high 4-star, he's an Elite 11 kid. He can make all the throws. The issue he's probably about 5'10", 5'11". You look at TCU's quarterback, Chandler Morris, for this year, he's about 5'10", 5'11". They have another kid from 2025, about 5'10", 5'11". And so they've kind of taken some big swings on kids. They've signed some highly recruited kids, but there's some kids that kind of have an asterisk at the offensive, like at the quarterback position. But they're doing a good job on the line, both offensive and defensive. TCU's collecting talented wide receivers like it's their singular purpose in life. I mean, every class is going to have 3, 4, 5 4-star kids that are, being recruited, have 25 offers. I mean, that's no problem. Where we need to see a bump into 2024 class, especially, I think, is on the defensive side of the ball. They've gotten some nice skill position players. They've got a lot of veteran talent, but that doesn't seem to be a priority this year. And that's something I've seen kind of other recruiting analysts touch on is, hey, TCU's Sonny Dykes is always going to recruit offensive firepower. He's always going to get stars on offense, but he hasn't proven that he can consistently build a defense. There's not necessarily a ton of holes right now, but there's about to be. So I think that we need to see that be a priority, especially in that 2024 group. So not a large group right now. That's why the rating is a little bit low. I think they're like in the top 40. But if you look at the overall grade, like the average grade of this class is really, really high. And so I think it's a good group. I'm not worried at all about 2024. We're probably not far from getting worried about 2024. But I do feel like recruiting has certainly been an uptick and still is going well for the Horned Frogs, but you'd like to see just a little bit more of a bump overall. So right now they're 52nd rated class, but they only have 12 commits. But their average grade is up in the high 80s, and so there's not a bad commit among them. There's just not kind of the quantity maybe that you'd expect, and I think that'll change. I mean, one thing we've heard from Sonny is that the thing he can do now is the guys are going to pick up the phone. So it's just a matter of kind of getting them on campus and closing them. And I think and when the transfer portal too shakes out, like I think TCU will still be a top 30 class, top 25 class.
So speaking of recruiting, Mike says, how has last year's playoff berth and win affected recruiting?
Yeah, so I did touch on that just a little bit. I think the biggest thing is that guys that might never have considered TCU are going to pick up the phone and visit campus now, and that's that elusive 5-star guy. We're still waiting for that 5-star out of high school, and so you kind of hope that maybe this year or next year you get that bump. It certainly impacted it. I think it'll be 2025 when we really see the results of that run. It's hard in 1 year, and I'm sure there's been some negative recruiting against TCU because of the way the national championship game went. But in talking to players and talking to coaches, they don't feel like that's been a hindrance to them, that score whatsoever. It's just a matter of they want to identify the right guys for the defense that they're playing, the right guys for the offense that they're trying to play. And so I think the biggest thing that they did was get Haas Haney at quarterback. They locked him up for really highly regarded running back and Jeremy Payne. And then their highest rated signee so far is a really high 4-star. He might end up being a 5-star by the time it's said and done at wide receiver, Jakyle Baker. And the great thing is out of those 12 commits, all 12 of them are Texas kids, mostly from DFW or the Houston area. And so, we're not seeing, it's not like they magically became a top 5 recruiting team in the country, but that's also, I don't know that Sonny Dykes is necessarily worried about being a top 5 out of high school recruit. I think he wants to see between the portal and high school a top 25 class. So guys are willing to pick up the phone. Transfers, I mean, that's where you're really seeing it. Like, you don't get 3 kids transferred from Alabama unless they're coming to play for national championships or feel like they can win a Big 12 title with this group. And so I think getting JoJo Earl, Tommy Brockmeyer, and I just totally blanked on the running back's name, which is so embarrassing because I absolutely know who it is. Hold on, let me make sure I've got that right. Come on, what is his name? Oh, so bad. I'm normally so good at that. It's just been Trey Sanders. There he is. Taylor Swift, man. I've got the Taylor Swift. My brain is not functioning. So Trey Sanders. You don't get those 3 guys coming to TCU unless they're coming to win. You don't leave Alabama to go somewhere where you're not going to have a chance to compete. So I think that's where we're seeing the early bump off that national championship game run.
Let's see. I think this kind of goes hand in hand with one of the comment questions, but does TCU have the ability and pieces in place for another New Year's Six bowl season?
I like that question much better than a playoff run because I don't know if this team is going to be a Final Four team. Do I think that they can get to a Big 12 championship? Yes. Do I think they can win a Big 12 championship? Cautiously optimistic. It's going to depend on quarterback play and offensive line play. But, could they be a team that wins 10 games and gets a berth, an at-large berth or something? Absolutely. Like, they're going to score points. And in the new look Big 12, when you add 4 teams, you're not playing everybody. You get rid of that round robin. Unfortunately for TCU, they might have one of the hardest schedules in November, late October, November of anybody. They could, my co-host on Frogs Insider, Jamie Plunkett, he's convinced TCU can start 7-0. I don't feel quite that good, but when you look at the schedule, it's certainly possible. But then you're finishing, you've got at Kansas State. That's going to be a really tough game. Kansas State was picked to finish second in the conference. You get Texas at home. You have to go to Lubbock on a Thursday night. That's going to be tough. You've got Oklahoma on Black Friday in Norman. You've got Baylor. You get them at home this year at least. So TCU they got dealt the top hand. They're not as lucky as Oklahoma State, who gets to play all 4 of the new teams. TCU has to go to Houston. They have to host BYU. And then they have the other games that I mentioned. And so I don't think they're going to make it unscathed, especially with a quarterback who, though he's been in college, it feels like forever, is still relatively inexperienced. I mean, Chandler Morris has 2 starts at TCU under his belt and hasn't made it through a second game in either season that he's been eligible to do so. 3 total starts. Sorry, he got hurt. And his second start his first year at TCU. So I think I would say most TCU people, those of us that cover the team or the real estate fans, would probably say, I think if we're at 8-9 wins, we feel pretty good about this season, and not necessarily a rebuilding year, but a year where you expect to you replace a ton of skill talent. You got 8 guys on NFL rosters right now that were high draft picks or signed as undrafted free agents. Um, 10 wins would be kind of like everything really broke well. And last year there was a lot of like, not turnover luck, 'cause I don't believe necessarily in turnover luck, but a lot of things bounced the right way. The floor though, that's what I'm more concerned. To me, if you tell me the floor is 6 wins, the floor is 7 wins, I'm pretty content in that. I think it's a bowl team for sure. I think if Chandler Morris is a total dog, which some people believe that he is, then getting to 10 wins is not out of the question. Getting to a Big 12 championship is not out of the question. But they've got a tough finish that schedule. The last 5 or 6 games is going to really test the depth of this team and just the confidence of Chandler Morris and that offensive line.
So you mentioned about your co-host, and I think him and I are kind of on the same wavelength here, because when I look at this schedule, I only see about 2 to 3 games that's questionable. This is about where I'm at right now. 12-0 for the ceiling, 10-2 for the floor.
There's so many question marks, right? Like, I guess that's my thing. And maybe that question mark could play into TCU is a positive thing, but you can't at Kansas State. Winning in Manhattan is tough enough. And I really think the Wildcats are going to be really, really good this year. You never want to play in Lubbock on a Thursday night. Texas at home. That's the last time those two teams are ever going to play in Fort Worth, probably. I think TCU's better than Baylor, but that's a rivalry game, and those things are weird. And then at Oklahoma, I have no idea what to expect. When you look at the Big 12 slate, like Colorado's a massive wild card. I saw it today was a 20-point spread. That feels way too high. Even though I do think TCU is obviously better than Colorado, and it's at home, and it's going to be big noon Saturday. There's a lot of excitement around that. You're at Houston for Houston's first Big 12 game. That's a night game. I don't know anything about what Houston's going to be like. That they've got to be one of the biggest question mark teams. I have a lot of faith in TCU's defense at their secondary. I think the secondary is going to be really, really good. And so that could kind of cover up for the offensive struggles early, but I have massive concerns about the pass rush, this defensive line. There's a lot of good players. I don't know if there's a standout there outside of Dominic Williams. But I don't know if they can generate pressure very well. And then the linebackers, there's great depth, but a lot of those guys haven't been able to stay healthy through a season. And so I think it's going to take TCU a little time to find their footing. Hopefully they don't slip up. And then you hope by the time you travel to Manhattan for K-State that you've kind of got your ducks in a row, so to speak. 12-0 would be awesome. 10-2 would be awesome. I feel like I'm kind of more in that 8 wins, 9 wins is where I kind of expect them to fall. If they get to 10 because they win a bowl game, like I said, I'll be ecstatic. If they make it back to Arlington for a Big 12 championship, I will think that, Sonny Dykes is once again a Coach of the Year candidate. You cannot replace a generational talent at quarterback, a guy who was a Heisman runner-up, first round wide receiver who's an absolute freak, the literal fastest guy in college football, and Darius Davis at wide receiver and punt returner. And he had, what was it, 6 punt returns for touchdowns last year?
I think so, yeah.
And if you look at the number of pick sixes that TCU had, just a lot of that stuff. I don't want to say that it wasn't magic by preparation, but it was magical season. Just every time you turned around, something was going TCU's way. The way they fell behind against Oklahoma State and Kansas State and come back to win both those games, the amount of starting quarterbacks that got hurt during close games that enabled TCU to pull. TCU was struggling against Kansas until Jalen Daniels, got hurt. They were struggling against Oklahoma State, and Spencer Sanders got pretty banged up. Will Howard actually came in and played better than Martinez for Kansas State, but and he was already hurt coming into that game. But the ball's bounced. Football preparation breeds luck and anticipation, but sometimes the ball bounces your way too. So I think that expecting 12-0, would be, any of us would be silly. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. But I certainly, even as a ceiling, I hesitate. I kind of say 10 wins would be my ceiling. Like in the regular season, 10 wins would be my ceiling. Because I don't think anyone's going undefeated in the Big 12 this year. It's going to be wacky. It's going to be like old school Big 12 wacky. It's going to be so fun.
So you're kind of like, you've been on the high because of the national championship run, and now you've kind of just like, okay, back to earth because we've lost a lot of pieces. Fan base, come on, let's
Yeah.
tamper it down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you want to build on that momentum because it's fun, and it's fun to be like, hey, like TCU kind of did something nobody expected, so why can't it happen again? I mean, Frogs were picked to finish 5th in the Big 12 this year after coming off of a national championship like game run, like after winning a playoff game against Michigan, the number 2 team in the country. Like, there's not a lot of people believe in this team, and I think Sonny Dykes will get to use that as motivation. But if I put my purple glasses on, then I'm like, hell yeah, like let's go back to the Big 12 championship and win it all. Why not? But if I look at it from my more of like analytical football journalist, person that covers the team mind, I kind of am like it would be really crazy if Sonny Dykes did that twice in a row. And maybe he will. Like, again, stranger things have happened, but like you replaced your OC, you replaced your quarterback, you replaced a generational talent wide receiver, you replaced your starting running back who, people sleep on Kendra Miller. That dude's going to be a heck of a pro. Like, he could be an all rookie team selection this year. He's going to be so good. Because that conference was loaded at running back last year. I mean, Bijan Robinson's going to take a lot of the shine away, but everything had to break right a season ago to start 12-0. And I'm still kind of hungry for that Big 12 championship. I'd rather be 10-2 and win a Big 12 championship than start 12-0 and lose it again, to be honest.
True. I'm sure, what's more important, the Big 12 championship or the undefeated record? Well,
it depends if it's getting into the Final Four or not, though, because that 12-0 record got us to the playoffs last year. The Big 12 championship, it will also thank you to USC for completely crapping the bed against Utah. So that was nice of Caleb Williams and company too. But yeah, again, but that was another thing. Like, everything broke TCU's way until the Big 12 championship, and then they dusted themselves off and manufactured that luck again, which was pretty crazy. But the Michigan game took 2 pick sixes. And just a lot of chaos. I mean, that was the most chaotic game I've ever watched in person. It was so much
fun. So Mike asks another question. What is TCU's history with the expansion teams BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston?
So UCF, I don't think TCU has ever played, and they will not get to play them this year. When you look at Houston, that's an old Southwest Conference mate. So that's a great rivalry getting rekindled, but a rivalry that was really before even my time as, the TCU student and or fan and or journalist. So I'm excited to kind of see how that plays out. I'm actually thinking about flying out to that game. So I've never been to a game at Houston before, and I think it would be kind of fun. But BYU is a juicy, juicy rivalry. TCU fans are ecstatic to have this rivalry back. The Mountain West Conference rivalry. People sleep on the Mountain West. Like, everybody kind of wondered when TCU got invited to the Big 12, why them? That conference was loaded because BYU, Utah, San Diego State was good for quite a few of those years. I mean, there were great programs in that league. It was the strongest group of 5 team far and away back in the day. And the TCU BYU rivalry was very, very fun. It was very intense and very heated. So we didn't get it for very long because BYU and independent TCU went to the Big 12. But I think that's going to be the homecoming game for TCU this year in Fort Worth. And those 2 fan bases are going to have a lot of fun kind of egging each other on. None of those teams are going to be as big a rivals as, a Baylor or Texas Tech right away. But I think that BYU rivalry will quickly become a marquee matchup. And I think that the UCF, they're big talkers on social media. The UCF fan base is loud. So I could see that very quickly also becoming a pretty fun matchup. I'm excited about, Cincinnati's like hot garbage right now, but they've shown they're willing to invest in the program in the past. So I think if we'll see what Scott Satterfield does, but I think all 4 of those teams in football and basketball, especially this basketball league, is going to be absolutely insane. And then also, I think they add a lot in baseball and the women's sports and everything too. So I'm really excited about the 4 new members. It was really fun hearing from the coaches and the athletic directors at Media Day. And I think that you're going to see a lot of fun new rivalries, not just from TCU, but from a lot of the other programs in the conference too. Houston certainly is going to raise everybody's hackles because of recruiting. So you'll see Texas Tech, Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, I think have great rivalries with Houston in the very near future.
So John asks, also, in addition to Colorado, who is the next team to join the Big 12? Now, I have a few other side questions with this. So, for one, I am hearing rumor rumbles that it could be Arizona. And with these conferences going well over their conference name limit, do we see something similar to the Southwestern Conference come back? But depending on who's in it, could it be more like South Pacific Conference or something like that?
So I think that one thing that Brett Yormark has really prioritized is branding, and they've invested a lot in building the brand of the Big 12. I think we're not far, probably in 2030-ish from all of this being for naught anyways, and looking at a completely different system for how college football is kind of aligned. But I think they'll stick with the Big 12 moniker for at least the next couple of years. I mean, Yormark is he's pretty savvy. And even him just kind of saying, okay, we got Colorado, I'm taking 14, who's next? I thought was a really kind of a gutsy move, a ballsy move. And so he gets to dictate and control. I do not think for 1 second they would turn down Washington or Oregon if those two teams made a call and it would go to 16 pretty easily. I don't think that he'd have any qualms about that, but I do think that he kind of made that statement to put some pressure on somebody. Arizona feels like the most likely team to go, the most likely to be the next domino to fall. But you also have a lot of other group of 5 schools that are really, really trying hard and vying for that spot. And now they obviously, I think, would prefer a Pac-12 team. But don't sleep either on the Gonzaga UConn basketball only memberships as well. So that's something that he's been in the works too. So I will say this, I am not dancing on the graves of the Pac-12 like a lot of Big 12 of my Big 12 brethren are. I don't want that conference to die. I think it's important. I'm a West Coast person. I love Pac-12 football. I love those after dark games. I think it's important. I think the Pac-12 also has one of the best, probably the best crop of quarterbacks top to bottom of any power league in the country this year, maybe any league, period. And so I don't like this. I know that Colorado coming to the Big 12 is good for the Big 12. And so ultimately it's good for TCU. So I'm not mad about that. I also like having a kind of a Western team to get to watch TCU play out every couple of years, maybe. But I think that Arizona is probably next. And it's going to be interesting to see what George Kliavkoff does to hold on to Washington and Oregon, because if he loses those two schools, I don't see how the Pac-12 survives looking anything like what it looks like today.
Right. So you mentioned possible group of 5 teams. What are your thoughts on Power 5 conferences pulling up group of 5s just to stay afloat? Because, I feel like, and, I've talked to a few people myself, and we've all kind of come to the conclusion that, if you're pulling group of 5 teams to give them Power 5 status to keep your conference alive, yes, that's helpful for you, the conference, but at the same time, what does it say about your conference? And if at some point, if the conference becomes all group of 5 schools, what's stopping the NCAA from stripping the Power 5 status from the conference and making it a group of whatever?
Well, TCU was a group of 5 team. They got pulled into a conference in order to save a conference, and it worked out pretty well for the conference and for TCU. One thing that you have to account for is that infusion of money, and that, the only thing the Power 5 status really does is kind of guarantee you position in the big bowl games, and the big bowl games, win or lose, pay a lot of money. And so when you look at, I was a student at TCU a very long time ago, well before, back when they were in the WAC. So I've seen the journey from the WAC to the Conference USA to the Mountain West Conference to the Big 12 Conference. And not only have I watched TCU football become more and more relevant on a national stage, but I've seen what that spotlight does for the campus as a whole. TCU, from when I was a student, is completely unrecognizable to what that campus looks like today. And that is on the back of the football program, because the football program going to and winning New Year's Six bowl games, getting nationally ranked, infuses so much cash and notoriety into the university as a whole. It's a trickle-down effect in the most positive of ways. TCU admissions is anticipating getting 30,000 applications next year. So for a school that's going to accept about, or is going to have a freshman class under 2,500, that's insane. So that becomes a very selective university, and tuition at TCU is about $72,000. So when you think of the amount of cash that's being just poured into that program, when you think of, I saw somewhere that I can't remember what the exact number was, but I want to say it was like $2.5 million worth of advertising that TCU getting to the national championship game, like free advertising that provided, like the amount of impressions is invaluable. So I think that if you find a group of 5 school that's willing to make an investment, then that school is going to step up and become a Power 5 player. If you invite I don't think Memphis is going to get an invite, but I know Memphis is very thirsty for it. And that's a school that has basically said, give us the opportunity to have this kind of cash flow and we'll invest in our programs. I think you're going to see that with Houston. I think that you're going to see that, with Cincinnati. The schools that earn the right to be given an invite is because they've shown that they're willing to spend what they have. Once they have more money, they're willing to spend it, with more excess to build up those athletic programs. And being invited to the Big 12 didn't just change TCU football, but it completely transformed TCU basketball. I mean, that program was a joke. It was one of the absolute worst in the country. There were 2 years when TCU was a Big 12 team that they played in a high school district gym while they were remodeling Schulmeyer Arena, and it was embarrassing. Like, we played Kansas in this high school gym. It was orange. It was it's just the worst thing ever. And we're just like, man, this is how far we've fallen. And now this is a program that's routinely expected to make the NCAA tournament after going 25 years between appearances not that long ago. So I think, you can't just invite anybody. But when you look at the schools that are on the list, when you talk about a San Diego State, you talk about an SMU, Boise State, these are schools that have invested in athletics and then also have invested oftentimes in the academic side of that too. So TCU's built a med school. Like, that's something that happened because of a Big 12 invite. TCU's built a performance and wellness center that'll be utilized for all athletes, not just for physical health, but mental health as well. These are all trickle down things that happen because you have access to the big boy money. And I think that schools that have shown that they can sustain not just their athletic programs, but their academic programs by being, judicious in their investments, if you can give them the opportunity to get a bigger slice of the pie, I think that's a positive for everybody.
When the first pieces of the way the Big 12 looks today kind of happened, and I mean, bringing in West Virginia, for example, do you feel like conference realignment is okay and it doesn't have to make sense? Because I mean, Cincinnati and West Virginia and the Big 12, I mean, I get Cincinnati because the Big 10 has a high standard with the AAU thing. Do you think it doesn't matter location making sense?
No, I hate it. I hate it. I think it's awful, if I'm being really honest. Obviously it's been good for TCU. And so in that sense, I'm thankful and appreciative of the fact TCU's had this opportunity. But as a college football fan, I think it's absolutely terrible for the sport. And I think that ultimately it's kind of the pride comes before the fall thing. I think that the commissioners are doing what they can to cash the biggest checks and bring in the most money possible for their conferences, and that's their job. But Sonny Dykes made a great comment of this when he kind of made a dig at Missouri and A&M for saying they thought the grass was going to be greener somewhere else, and they're cashing their checks to go 4-8. And then he kind of said, I know I personally can't wait for the big rivalry game between UCLA and Rutgers in 2 years, and so, and that's my thing, is that as somebody that lives on the West Coast where college sports just isn't as big of a deal. It's just not as important as it is in other parts of the country. And I will say, that's kind of a good thing to some degree. I think that little realism around athletics is a positive in some aspects. But the reason is because there's not a lot of regional rivalries. There's not a lot of major college teams in the state of California. There's basically 4. You have Cal and Stanford, and Cal is an absolute dumpster fire in athletics and resources and mismanagement and everything. One of the best academic, schools in the country, but everything else is a complete total disaster there right now. And then you have USC and UCLA, both of whom are trying to dig themselves out of big holes because they mismanage. And the UC system in California is just, I'm a high school teacher. I can go on a whole other tangent on that. With great schools, amazing schools. If only I could get my students into them, I would feel so much better. But what has made college football matter in the South and in parts of the Midwest, places like Ohio and Michigan and Nebraska, are those rivalries. And this is what I've noticed too, being, where I am now versus when I was in the DFW area as a teacher. You go in Monday morning and it's literally the water cooler. Everybody's meeting around the coffee or the water cooler and they're talking about high school college football scores from the weekend before. Go into class. And all my students want to talk about on a Monday was those. And it was because it meant something to them. They don't go to those schools. We make fun of the T-shirt fans at places like Ohio State and Michigan and Texas and Oklahoma, right? But at the end of the day, those T-shirt fans are there because they live in the region or they grew an association or somebody in their family, had that. And the reason it became so important to them, whether they went to the school or not, is because they had some type of attachment. And normally that attachment comes with a rivalry. And you start taking away those regional rivalries, you are going to start to lose the fans that don't otherwise have an association with those schools. There is not a person in the world that is going to care about UCLA Rutgers, especially if both those teams aren't any good. How are you going to get people fired up about that game? That game sucks. You as a UCLA fan want to fly to across the other side of the country to watch a crappy Rutgers game at 7 p.m. Eastern? Absolutely not. There's no way. Are you as a Rutgers fan going to stay up to 10 p.m. to watch your team play at USC? No way in hell. It's gonna diminish the importance, and I think that lesson's going to be learned a really difficult way, because what we're seeing, and Yormark even said this, that if the Big 12 signed their deal this year, it would have been worth a lot less than it was last year, because the streaming bubble is about to burst as well too. Everybody sold cord cutting as a way to save money and to make your life easier as a consumer. All it is now is everybody's got their own network, and it's more expensive and it's more hard to find the things you want to watch. So I think that we're in for a rude awakening. I think that it's a money grab is what realignment is right now. And I don't blame them, because they see the writing on the wall with NIL and the transfer portal, and it's going to get a lot less easy to control your money makers off the field. And kids are learning how to advocate for themselves, which I'm a big fan of, even though I know it's also completely changed the sport. But at the end of the day, it's not fair for everybody to make money except for the ones that are the reason that people are watching. So I think that losing regionalization is really ultimately bad for the sport. And I think it can ultimately end up affecting how successful the game is as a whole. I don't think college football is ever going to die, but I do think that you're losing the thing that made it the best previously,
So that's kind of the point that I want to touch on, because my little bubbles that I've talked to people in, we kind of I know, I'm sure you do, because you talk about nothing but the frogs, basically. I love college football. College football to me is a lot more interesting than the NFL.
I agree.
Just everything about it is much better. And there's a lot of people that I talk to that are kind of worried now with the 12-team format. And now you're basically crowning a champion. Let's say somehow a 5 seed wins and they finished undefeated, but their resume wasn't as good as the other 4 conference champions. Well, if they finish undefeated at 13-0, they're going to win the national championship at 18-0 or something. So now your season's almost as long as the NFL regular season. Do you believe in the possible right now it's kind of small because people don't necessarily see it yet. But do you believe in the possible fear of college football becoming the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know if we're headed fully that direction, but we're certainly headed a big step in that direction. I think that the 12-team playoff does extend the season. Obviously, it doesn't look like it's going to be. I mean, look, TCU played for a national championship on January 9th, I think. Like, it was a long season. Your first game is on September 2nd. Your last game is on January 9th. We've already extended it way, way beyond. And you're just going to have less time between games, which of course is going to make the product worse ultimately, but it's better for TV. There's a lot of dead time between, the conference championship games and the big bowl games. So, but yeah, I mean, again, like at the end of the day, and I think that's what we all need to understand, whether it's as fans, whether it's media, whatever it is that the thing that is going to rule this is money. And the one thing we've seen about college football to this point is people are going to watch. Like, it does not matter what you put up. People are going to watch. They're going to pay attention. Now, the question becomes, is there a point to where that no longer becomes true? In certain parts of the country, yeah, I think we're seeing that. I mean, it's certainly shrinking from both coasts and becoming more centralized in the South and the Midwest as far as interest level. But there's still a lot of people in all parts of the country that really, really care about the game of college football. Is it going to get so diluted that people start to care less or the quality goes down? I mean, that's going to be kind of the next question. So you're never going to beat out the NFL for eyeballs. You're just never going to do that. Like, it's too powerful. It's too entrenched. But college football is far from a niche sport. But I think I worry that greed is going to get in the way of protecting the ultimate good of the game from the power brokers at the top. And I think, I was talking to somebody today and I'm trying to remember what conference it was. I can't remember what it is, but one of the conferences during this whole level of realignment went super regionalized, with their pods, and ticket sales have been through the roof because people can drive to the games. They can go to the away games. They can watch teams that they're familiar with play at home. I think if we see success in that level, then maybe that will help people kind of go, maybe this isn't the right way. Getting a team just to get a team, just to fill the coffers. Like, again, I'm not saying it's the wrong move today, because I think it's absolutely the right move. What Brett Yormark with the Big 12 are doing. I wonder what their long-term ramifications are of that, and what the sport as a whole is going to look like 10 years from now. Because I do think that we're headed down a path that's going to make it a lot less fun, and then it's going to feel a lot more corporate, like the pro games do today.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I'll probably still watch. I'm sure you will, but I just don't really know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, because there's been some talk of like, well, do we shorten the season, go back to the way it was before the BCS National Championship game was invented, and have 11 games? And I think before that it was even 10 at one point. And as far as the pods, the only thing I heard about like pods was SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something when you get to about 16 teams, not everybody is doing, but something that, I mean, you're going to have to, if you want to continue to expand at the level that these conferences are expanding on, and you want to leave some level of regionality in it, like that's kind of the next step. But then it's the same thing that it's going to suck with the SEC. If you're, I don't know how the pods break down, but say you're, Auburn, you may only play Oklahoma once every 5 years. Like, how are you going to build a rivalry? How are you going to care about that game? Like, maybe it's always going to be a big game because it's Oklahoma, but like, what's the fun in that? Like, I will miss the 10-team Big 12 because the playing everybody every year was awesome. Like, it built so much like positive animosity towards, like, you had instant like memory. You had immediate revenge storyline every single time you stepped on the field, and like that was really awesome. And now, like, we don't play Oklahoma State this year. We don't play West Virginia, and that's actually been kind of a fun little rivalry. So it's not and in basketball, like the double round robin in basketball, losing that really, really sucks. Like, getting to play, knowing that you were going to get to host Kansas as a school every year, like that's huge for those programs. Like, cause you're going to sell that out, knowing that you're going to get to play, a round robin with Texas Tech and Baylor every year as a TCU fan. Like, that's huge. Like, losing all of those types of things in this conference expansion is a bummer. But like the sport's all about money. Like, college athletics is all about money at the end of the day. And that's going to be the driving force for the foreseeable future. So I think, like, as fans, we just kind of have to be like, well, we'll find our own way to make it fun. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm still going to go to games. I'm still going to, love watching and covering TCU. That's never going to change. But will my interest in the greater picture of the sport diminish? Yeah. I mean, more than likely. I am not going to have the bandwidth to pay as much attention.
Right. So the last question from me, it seems that the direction we're heading in is like a power two.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of where I'm like, it almost looks NFL like. Do you think we see something like that, and do you like the direction that college football is going? Because I talked with a Florida State guy the other day, and we both agreed. I said, like, the pack is probably dead after 2030. The ACC is probably not far behind, because there are rumblings of about 4 schools most likely announcing they're leaving this week. There's, like I said, there was rumbling of Arizona leaving, but it's just rumbling, and at this point it's just rumors. I'm not trying to say anything's official yet, because we only track in the truth.
Well, I think what's going to be interesting is, every school is talking about wanting to leave, but you got to have somewhere to go. And the more schools that you add to the SEC and the Big Ten deals, the less money every school gets within that. And so unless you're really moving the needle, adding a Texas for the SEC is basically a no-brainer, right? Like, that's a pretty easy decision to make. They do bring a massive, rabid fan base, and they're one of the, 2 or 3 wealthiest athletic departments in the country annually. So, but, if you're a Miami, and everybody thinks Florida State's going to be a big thing, but again, like I talked about earlier, the streaming bubble's about to burst. So a school you have to make your next TV deal worth $30 to $40 million annually by joining a conference. The Big Ten, if it was really interested in gobbling up all of the schools, Oregon and Washington are gone last summer.
Yeah.
When USC and UCLA left, the Big Ten should have grabbed Oregon and Washington if they wanted to be a Power 2 conference. And so, for as much as I think we thought that that's what the Big Ten and the SEC were trying to do, and maybe what I could see is them going autonomous of the NCAA so that they can control the transfer portal and NIL and control their athletes a little bit more. But I just don't think it's realistic. I think the sport's going to change, but you also have to look too, and this, kind of maybe high level stuff, but participation numbers in football, because of the concussions and the other issues, have gone down significantly in some parts of the country. You might just have less people playing. And if you have less people playing, maybe you're going to have a slightly lower, quality of product too. And that could be an issue as well. I don't know that it's going to change enough. I don't think it's going to kill football by any stretch of the imagination, but you're definitely seeing fewer kids participating in the sport than were previously, which is why you've seen things like flag football really pop up for girls and boys, is trying to find ways to keep people interested in the sport. You're not doing that if you're not have some level of concern. There's also, this is going to be interesting too, to talk about a lot of this in education, but there's the enrollment cliff coming because of the 2008 recession. People stopped having kids. There just aren't that many 18-year-olds coming the next couple of years too. And so that's something that I don't know if that's going to impact talent, because it's still such a small percentage of people that are good enough to earn a Division I scholarship. But again, there's just less human beings that age in America, for the next couple of years because of that recession. So that's also really fascinating. There's a lot of things that are going to impact this. There's obviously more questions than answers. The ACC, because of the way that their grant of rights is written up, it's going to be fascinating to see if these schools can leave. what they do to do it. I think the Big 12 was dead in the water until Brett Yormark came on board and started just like firing guns blazing craziness, which I really respect out of him. And so if you're the SEC and the Big 10 right now, and you were thinking you were just going to do your own little thing, now maybe you're looking and saying it's really hard to go independent. It's really hard to run your whole conference by yourself and not to have somebody kind of looking out for you. And again, if that's really what they wanted to do, why are they begging Congress to step in and help with NIL? It's like, if you're really just planning on booking it, why are you getting the government involved in your tiny little problems? Like, also, the government has so many bigger things to worry about. Like, please do not care about college football. I would just like fix Social Security, and healthcare. Like, I don't care. Like, let's just get whatever. But yeah. So I think everybody is kind of, it's the one of my favorite sayings from my time in Texas was all hat and no cattle, right? And a lot of these guys are walking around with 10-gallon hats and they got no cattle. They got nothing to back it up. And so there's a lot of talk, but until you start taking action, it's going to be really hard to see what comes in. And that's what's going to be interesting with Colorado. They talked and talked and talked, and then they just said, F it, we're leaving. Will it be a good move for them? I mean, probably, but what happens when Deion Sanders leaves in 2 years for FSU or the NFL? Is Colorado still going to add value to the Big 12? They didn't really add much value to the Pac-12 for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Deion, like, strike while the iron's hot, smart on Colorado. I mean, that was their president and their board going, we better do this while people actually care about us. But it's a lot of people doing a lot of things without thinking about the future. And I think that's because they know the future is all going to get blown up anyways. And in 2030, I think things are going to change. So everybody's just trying to, again, cash grab while they can, hope for the best.
Yeah, I think at this point, we just kind of look back and enjoy what we've had. And hopefully when everything just blows up in 2030, hopefully it's not too bad and we have some resemblance of what we've had.
Yeah. There'll be something and it'll be fun, but it might, you might just follow your team like that. That might be the thing that comes next, which will be interesting too. So we're, 2023 is going to be a blast. There's like some really good teams. There's a lot of great quarterbacks. I mean, this is shaping up to be a really fun year of college football. I'm just kind of the mindset of, hey, like TCU had an amazing season in 2022. We got nothing but hopes for 2023. I'm going to be down there to watch Deion Sanders coach a football game at TCU and be in his press conference after. That's something that if you had told, 15-year-old Melissa that had his poster on her wall that she'd be doing, I never would have believed it for so many reasons. So I think just kind of enjoying the sport where it is. And, it's fun to talk about these things and all of these what ifs. It gives us something to do in the off season for sure, right? Keeps the news cycle moving. But, at the end of the day, it's these decisions are going to get made by people. They're not going to care what we think they've proven that so many times. Right. And so you just kind of hope that you still have a team to root for and that they still get to play games that matter. And after that, whatever.
Yeah. Hopefully, not a whole lot changes, but hopefully I agree. I mean, 2023 is looking like it could shape up to be a good year for college football. And I'm definitely excited to see overall what happens and cheering on the teams that I like. It almost felt to me like you were talking about, like with Boise State, it almost felt to me like there was about 3 years, like 08, 09, and 10, where it was like, Boise State and TCU they were in the same conference at one point, and
for 1 year. 1 year.
Yeah. Why don't we have that happen again? That is an underrated rivalry that could happen. I mean, the teams are in two totally different places right now, but Kellen Moore, Andy Dalton.
Yeah, it was. We had the Poinsettia Bowl, we had the Fiesta Bowl in back-to-back years, and then Boise State joined the Mountain West as TCU was exiting. It had an all-time classic game up in Boise. Casey Paha to Josh Boyce with a 2-point conversion to win it. It was a really fun game. It was a fun rivalry. I would welcome playing Boise State again. I wouldn't mind, getting to travel there for a game too. Boise's a pretty beautiful place. I have a lot of students to go to Boise State, so that'd be a lot of fun for me. But I almost feel bad. I don't feel bad for SMU because screw SMU because I went to TCU, so screw them. But I do feel a little bit bad for Boise State because they do get kind of thrown around as like the school nobody wants. When they actually, they have nice facilities. They generally have really good coaching. Their basketball team has had some nice moments as well. It's, everyone kind of wants to throw the academics, is kind of the issue for them, but it's not a bad school. They belong somewhere. I could definitely, if the Pac-12 tries to go the Mountain West variety in order to bolster itself, I think San Diego State, UNLV, Boise State, SMU, those are probably the teams that get the first call. But the Pac-12, kind of turned its nose at the Big 12 schools when the Big 12 was on life support, and look where that got them. So I'll be interested to see if they kind of come down from their lofty academic perches and say we just need to survive, or if they really try to just band together as a 9-team conference, or maybe just invite one of those schools temporarily in order to survive and hold tight to their academics first. Which, I mean, you look at the caliber of some of those schools, it's hard to argue with. But then also, like, Arizona State is there, and we all know Arizona schools are party schools. And this doesn't mean they're not good academic schools too. You can be both. So that's
yeah. I mean, with the possibility of Arizona coming in, it's like, do they bring Arizona State with them to keep the rivalry? Does that rivalry become non-existent? Does it become Georgia Tech? It's all interesting.
It's gonna be there are a lot of questions, and a lot that's going to be revealed here, and I think we'll see a couple more dominoes fall, but before the first of the season. But it could still be another year before we really know. Until the Pac-12 announces its media deal, I think we're all going to be asking questions pretty consistently. So,
yeah, I think that was just a bad handling of the media deal.
Yeah, Larry Scott really did them in, and it's going to be a lot to recover from it.
Well, I know we went a little bit longer than expected, but so thank you for coming on. I guess to close us out, even though most of it I think is scrolling underneath us, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at the Coach Melissa on Twitter, and I'm with Dave Campbell. Frogs Insider is part of the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football podcast network. So you can find us as Frogs Insider on Apple, Spotify, or if you want to download if you're interested in any Division I school in the state of Texas, there's probably a Republic of Football podcast dedicated to it. There's a lot of really great shows. Baylor, Texas Tech, Houston, Texas A&M. SMU, I think we're working on. So the goal is ultimately to have all 14 Division I FBS schools in Texas covered with their own podcast. So really cool network. Love being a part of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, which is an institution in the state, and it's fun to have that as part of my bio and where I get to do my stuff. And then once the season starts, I'll be writing on my Patreon as well, Frogs Insider on Patreon, which like $3 a month to read what I write, and I've got a couple other folks jumping in this fall too. So,
well, thank you for coming on. Hopefully, TCU at least does enough to make a bowl game, because we'd love to have you back on.
Hey, listen, if we don't make a bowl game, we got all kinds of bigger problems. So I think we can at least do that, but hopefully one that people are excited about.
Absolutely. Well, best of luck to TCU. Thanks again, and
thanks for having me.
Hopefully, we can catch up in the postseason.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Just to kind of close us out here. Yes, comment, like, and subscribe. And I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. Dependent, I saw your comment. I did not want to interrupt Melissa, but the last thing I will say is that the Big Ten is big on the AAU, but You only have to be showing you're trying to get it. You don't have to have it. And to go on the expansion point, guess what? Miami, Florida has their AAU. So that's definitely something to think about. But with that being said, thank you everyone on Twitter and on YouTube for showing up and enjoying the show. Please, please, please comment, like, and subscribe. That is the easiest and best way that we can grow the channel every day. We are currently at 131 subs, and I hope we can keep growing. So thank you again, and we will see you next time. Everyone have a good